Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by The Athletic and CLNS Media. Today's show is going to be a mailbag podcast. I've been getting a lot of requests recently to do a mailbag episode if I could. And, you know, it's kind of the dead time of the basketball season right now, that late August, early September period before college basketball starts getting going, before NBA training camp starts getting going. It's really kind of difficult to find content. We're actually going to start up with previews beginning on Friday. We're going to start with the Atlantic Division and then kind of go out within the NBA, and we're going to go out and do some college basketball previews. But we're not quite there yet. So I reached out to you guys, and I'm so lucky. I got over 100 questions to answer here. And I'm not going to get to them all, obviously, but I really appreciate everyone reaching out and interacting with the show and continuing to interact with me on Twitter and dealing with me. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. This episode is going to be presented by FanDuel. Again, we'll get to that ad later on in the episode, but I wanted to shout them out at the top. The first question here is going to be from God Shamparticle at Hilco Hoops in Austin. Hey, shout out Texas. I hope you guys are okay. This first question is, who are the top 5 regression candidates in the NBA for the 2017-18 season? And who are the top 5 improvement candidates in the NBA 2017-18 season? I'm just going to answer the second part of that. Regression candidates are always a little bit tough just because I kind of tend to just fall on the spectrum of aging curves. So basically, a lot of the guys over 30 that you would kind of expect to regress would probably be my picks there. But what I think this question gives me a chance to do is talk a little bit more about some of the under 23 guys that I didn't get a chance to whenever I ranked the top 25 players that were 23 and under. So I talked about D'Angelo Russell. I talked about Miles Turner, Brandon Ingram, Aaron Gordon. Like, those guys I think are all pretty good candidates for something like this. I think they all make quite a bit of sense to choose for something like this, but I've talked about them at length. They certainly would, qualify as an answer to this question. But the guys that I kind of want to shout out that I haven't really gotten a chance to talk about yet, and maybe these aren't like the top guys like the question asked for, but I think Rodney Hood is going to be really good this year. It did seem like Hood, before he dealt with some injury issues last year, was really kind of taking that next step toward potentially becoming a high-level scorer in the NBA. Without Gordon Hayward around, without George Hill around, I would venture that he's going to get quite a bit more opportunity to run some offense. He's actually always been a really good pick-and-roll player. He can really, really shoot the basketball. I think he can develop into a really versatile offensive weapon, which last year he didn't really get a chance to see. Like I said, he dealt with get a chance to show. He dealt with injuries. He missed, I think, like 25 games, and then it didn't seem like he was totally healthy all the time when he was out there on the floor. I think his overall shooting percentages fell basically across the board. His passing particularly wasn't quite as good. I think that he might be in line for something like an 18-point, 4-rebound, 4-assist year or something like that, because he's going to get a lot of chances with the ball in his hands, I think, to be that secondary creator next to Ricky Rubio in their offense. The second guy I want to call out here is a guy that I kind of talked about a little bit within those podcasts, but Julius Randle. He seems like he's really getting into elite level physical condition now. He's starting to really prioritize shooting 3-pointers going forward. And I've always been a really big fan of his game if he could kind of, continue to get into that pristine physical shape, because I think he can be the kind of mobile, athletic, playmaking 4-5 kind of combo big that is really difficult to find in today's NBA. I think that you're still always going to want to pair him at least with a weak side rim protector. A guy like a Serge Ibaka, or maybe even for a younger guy like a Jonathan Isaac, who isn't necessarily going to be able to stand up and dominate at the rim. But I think that if you can, maybe pair Julius Randle with a guy who can at least rotate over from the backside and block some shots and, cause some havoc at least, I think that could be pretty good. Really good passer, though. Obviously one of the best defensive rebounders in the NBA. I think that pairings with him and Brook Lopez offensively are going to be awesome, especially whenever you put them with Lonzo Ball. He's going to be able to kind of dime those guys out for three-pointers. Julius Randle's really good as a chase rebounder. Brook Lopez is really good as a box-out rebounder. I think that mix on the glass is really going to fit well together. Wouldn't surprise me if we saw like a 15 and 10 year with like 3 or 4 assists a game from Julius Randle. Because, again, like another thing about Lonzo Ball is that he kind of does need a guy to kind of help him run some offense in the half court occasionally. And the Lakers don't really have that secondary option that I think is going to play with him a ton. Like I would imagine they let Jordan Clarkson run a lot of second units and only run out there occasionally with Lonzo. I think having Randle kind of be able to operate at the top of the key might be a pretty interesting idea. A third guy I want to call out is who might have been the most disappointing rookie in the NBA last year, Chris Dunn. I'm still a believer in Chris Dunn. I don't know if he'll necessarily be like a top like starting point guard level guy next year, but I think that he should get a lot of opportunity in Chicago to run the show. I mean, I know that at Summer League they kind of ran him off the ball and let Cameron Payne run the show, which didn't make any sense to me, but I think that he's going to get a chance to run some point guard. I think that him and Zach LaVine could actually be a pretty interesting combination. Dunn can be an elite level defender, can take on some of those tougher responsibilities for LaVine. LaVine can be the elite floor spacer that Chris Dunn really does need next to him at all times. So I like that mix of talent at least together, and they're both hyper athletic. Dunn a little bit stronger, a little bit tougher. LaVine a little bit skinnier, a little bit more explosive. So I like that mix as long as LaVine can come back from injury and be healthy. And like I said, I think he's just going to get opportunity in Chicago this year, and I'm a believer in the talent. Buddy Hield is going to be an interesting guy to watch this year as well. His numbers in Sacramento late in the year were actually pretty strong. And then you look at what Sacramento added at the point this year. They bring in De'Aaron Fox. They bring in George Hill. Buddy Hield averaged 15 points a game on a 58 effective field goal percentage in those 25 games in Sacramento last year. I think that's actually going to be a pretty strong candidate here to average right around 18 points a game, kind of like I said with Rodney Hood. I think he's going to get some opportunity, and I think that anytime Buddy's gotten a lot of opportunity, he's just kind of run with it. So as long as he gets the ball in the right spots, which I think having a veteran point guard like George Hill will allow for, and having a mature, if young, point guard in De'Aaron Fox, because no one really questions him, above the shoulders. He is a really smart kid. I think that could really help Hield be put in the right spots. And then kind of an underrated guy that, he's a little bit older, so I think he doesn't necessarily get credit for the kind of year that he actually had last year as a rookie. He'll be 24, I think, like midway through this NBA season as a second-year player, is Taurean Prince in Atlanta. I would imagine that, given the fact that he started playoff games for them last year, he'll probably be seen as a starter for Atlanta this year, which I think is going to be a good thing for his game. I think he can actually do quite a bit when it comes to scoring the basketball. He's a really good shooter. I think that he can attack closeouts well. He's a long defender who can kind of play all the way 2 through 4 almost. So I'm interested in Taurean Prince. I think if he averaged something like, 14 points and 5 rebounds a game in what is a pretty ugly situation in Atlanta talent-wise, that wouldn't really be a surprise because I think he's actually going to get a decent amount of opportunity. Let's move on. Let's take another question here from Brock Landers. He asks me, who were my best and worst evals ever on draft night? This is something I've wanted to answer on the podcast for a long time because I think it's actually a really fun topic for some reason to just basically call out why I'm an idiot. I think the worst one I had was probably Rudy Gobert. I bought the upside, but I just never thought it would come together at all. Like when you watched him in Europe and watched him in France, he wasn't a super fluid athlete like he is now. He didn't really ever kind of, he wasn't able to guard on the perimeter like he can now. And he wasn't as active rotating over to the weak side whenever guys would drive toward the rim. And he just wasn't as athletic as he is now. And the two lessons from Rudy Gobert that I've learned are that you can't misevaluate hands, and you can't underestimate that, because while Rudy does still kind of fumble passes that are like kind of thrown chest level and lower, he has really good hand-eye coordination above like kind of his shoulders and above his head, which is awesome when it comes to rebounding. It's awesome when it comes to timing, blocking shots and everything. And that's obviously where he's become just absolutely unstoppable. And then the second thing that I learned was you really have to evaluate these guys as kids. I mean, that was back in 2013, I think, when Rudy was a draftee, and me being 23 years old, I guess I didn't understand how important backgrounds were and how valuable being able to evaluate these kids just generally as human beings were, and how hard they were going to work and everything like that. Gobert was a big selling point in terms of really trying to value that a little bit more. The guys that I tend to hit on, though, are often the older, like kind of role player types. I think that the two big ones were probably Malcolm Brogdon. I basically thought that he was a first-round pick from the time he was a junior. I was a really big fan of him basically the whole way. Norman Powell is another example of a guy like that. I think I had Powell rated as a first-round pick that year. Josh Richardson, I think I was much higher on than consensus, at least, and he seems like a pretty solid role player in Miami, even though he dealt with injuries a bit last year. Trying to think. I think I had Alan Crabb as a first-round pick too. That's an interesting another example of a guy that players who can come in and just fill roles immediately are exceedingly useful in today's NBA. And as long as you can come in and just do something, like with Norman Powell, he can defend and be athletic. Malcolm Brogdon is really mature and he can pass and he can basically do everything and defend. Alan Crabb could come in and shoot basically off the jump. So I think we often underestimate in the later portion of the draft what a player can become and what the advantage is of taking like a super high upside guy late in the first round really is. I've always been a bigger proponent of taking more mature players who you can more easily slot into roles than taking projects late in the first round. So I think that that's probably the type of player that I hit on more often than others, which is worth calling out. Maybe I miss on some upside guys, but I'm willing to kind of live with that. Kent Sterling of the Kent Sterling Show out in Indiana asks me, what the hell is the deal with people believing Indiana is going to sink to the bottom tier of the Big Ten? This is Indiana, for God's sake. I long-term think that Indiana's in great hands. Archie Miller is awesome. He is really just kind of get it done where he needs to get it done. He's going to recruit well. I think he's an awesome coach at motivating players. I think that schematically he's a really great defensive coach, particularly. This year I'm a little bit more skeptical on them. Like Kent followed up to me thinking that he believes Indiana is going to be a tournament team. I probably would not go that far. Just kind of looking at the talent on the roster right now, the guy that I probably like the most is Juwan Morgan. A very versatile kind of combo forward who is athletic, who can really defend in space and who can block shots. And, he's actually a really good passer as well. They bring in Race Thompson as well. He's kind of like a stretch four. That could be useful. They have Deron Davis, who, big-bodied, low-post, true threat. Both Morgan and Thompson mix well with Davis. I'm just a little bit more concerned still about the backcourt. One thing that Archie Miller has always done reasonably well is get guys to play within themselves a little bit more. And the question is, for me, is that because Archie recruits guys who play within themselves, or because he's good at getting through to players and kind of showing them how to play within themselves? I think it's a really difficult question to answer, and I think that we're going to find out this year because, Josh Newkirk really, really struggled with turnovers last year. Robert Johnson has struggled in the past with turnovers. Curtis Jones and Devontae Green have been a little bit out of control when I've seen them on the floor. So we'll see. I think that I saw that Lindy's had them 12th in the Big Ten. I wouldn't go that far. I definitely wouldn't have them that low. I think they're just going to be a middle of the pack Big Ten team. And when you kind of look around the country, that team could be a tournament team. It could not be a tournament team. I'm not super high on the Big Ten this year. I think it's probably more of a 5 to 6 bid league than a 7 to 9 bid league than as it has been in the past. So I would probably side with Indiana not making the tournament this year, but I wouldn't rule it out either. It's just going to be tough to figure out what exactly happens with this Indiana group this year under a new coach and under a new development staff. I guess I would say that I'm a little bit more skeptical still than in on Indiana at this stage. Joseph Ward at Wise Ward 100 asks, how does the value of the Nets pick and just general salary matching compare to the contracts of DeMar DeRozan, CJ McCollum, Kemba Walker, Bradley Beal, Marc Gasol, Kristaps Porzingis, and Andrew Wiggins? I would say starting at the bottom, Porzingis and Wiggins, I would take both of those over the Nets pick. They still have just so much player control, and they've established themselves as really good players already. I would take both of them. I would also take both of CJ McCollum and Bradley Beal over that Nets pick, just because CJ I'm a really big believer in at this stage, which is crazy given where I kind of came from, because he's actually one of those guys that I wasn't very correct in evaluating. I thought he was going to be more of a Randy Foye type, a good rotation player, but not necessarily a star. He's turned all the way into that offensively. He's absolutely unbelievable. I would definitely trade the Nets pick for him. I would imagine Portland would not even consider it. Same with Washington and Bradley Beal. They're trying to compete. He still has 3 to 4 years left on that contract, so I would not even consider that. Kemba is one where it starts to get a little bit more intriguing, because I'm a huge fan of Kemba's game. There's no doubt about that. But the contract is where you start to kind of get concerned, because he does only have 2 more years at a bargain basement price of $12 million. But the player control aspect there does really, really, really matter to me. If I was Cleveland, particularly whenever I was trying to decide if I would, make a trade for Kemba, I probably wouldn't. I would rather just take my chances for a year with Isaiah whenever it comes to playoff time. And then the last one would be DeMar DeRozan. I believe DeRozan has 2 more years on his deal. I don't think it really matters, because I can't imagine Toronto dealing DeRozan for that pick. But I would think in a vacuum, that's pretty close to how I evaluate that pick. I think DeRozan is right around a top 25 player in the NBA at 2 more years left on an expensive salary. I think it's a similar situation with Kyrie, basically, right? Kyrie is a top 25 player in the NBA, 2 years left. Kyrie probably is a little bit more valuable because he's a little bit younger, but I basically said from the jump, I think that's right around where this pick is in terms of value. It's right around in the prime star with 2 more years left on salary, just because you get 8 years of team control, or at least 7 to 9 years of team control, depending on if you let the guy hit restricted free agency. Whenever you draft these guys and they hit. Even if they don't hit, I think that you can make a case that, the average outcome of a top 5 pick, which I think this Nets pick is going to be, is probably right around, a top 50 player. And if you get a top 50 player for 8 years, or you get a top 150 player for 3 years plus a top 50 player for 6 years, that's probably still right around what the value of DeRozan is, long term. You're just getting it with DeRozan in a more condensed time frame. So I think that's probably actually a pretty good idea of where I would evaluate that pick as an asset. DeRozan is a very, very good player, obviously, and if that's where I'm evaluating this pick, I think that is, kind of where I stand on it. I think it's an interesting question, though. Hayden Dietrich asks, do you think Rui Hachimura will break out this year? I do. He had a really, really big U19 tournament. 6'8", Japanese Beninese player who plays for Gonzaga. I think that he's a potential first-round pick this year. Full stop. Really athletic. The jump shot looks a lot more fluid. Looks a lot stronger than what I expected it to look. In that tournament already. Gonzaga is one of the best development programs in the entirety of college basketball, so I just kind of have faith in those guys to get it done. Overall, I think that he is going to be one of their best players this year. I actually threw him into my top 100 players in college basketball thing that I did for Athlon as well, so I'm a really big Rui fan. Before we move on, though, let's go on ahead and pay the bills here. Fantasy football fans, the wait's nearly over. On Thursday, the NFL season begins. Football is back, which means FanDuel is back. Fantasy football for everyday fans. New contests starting every week. No busted seasons. Something for everyone. Lots of contests to choose from, starting at just $1. Just pick a contest, choose your team, and watch your score in real time. I'm excited to start playing daily fantasy again, especially when it comes to football, because I'm not really a big NFL bettor. I love betting on college football, but it's for me essentially, having a long-term 1 week skill game of betting. So I enjoy FanDuel's experience. Over 2.5 million players have won a cash prize playing fantasy sports on FanDuel. So sign up today. Go to FanDuel.com, click the Join Now button, and use my code GameTheory. Try FanDuel for free with no deposit required. Visit FanDuel.com to claim your free contest and play for a share of $10,000. Just sign up using promo code GameTheory. That's GameTheory. That's FanDuel.com. Promo code GameTheory. Void where prohibited. All right. The next question here is from Dylan Thompson. He says, Matt Moore over at CBS, good friend of the program. Shout out, Matt. I actually owe basically my entire career to him. Said yesterday that if Cleveland was listening on the Brooklyn pick, Sacramento should be banging on their door with a mix of vets and young guys. Can you talk about what a trade between Sacramento and Cleveland would look like if that pick was involved? He mentioned Kufus and Temple Plus. So I'm not someone who really sees a whole lot of value in Kosta Kufus to Cleveland. I think that they're basically set at the big position because ultimately, for me, at the end of the day, the teams that theoretically Cleveland should be worried about are Boston, who's going to play small, Golden State, who obviously plays super small, and Washington, who does have Marcin Gortat and Jan Mahinmi, but those guys don't necessarily strike fear in me. I do like the idea of getting Garrett Temple. He's another multi-positional defender. I think he actually would match up really, really well in a series with Golden State for Cleveland. I'm not trying to trade this Nets pick for depth, I guess. If I'm giving up this Nets pick, it needs to be for something of a star, something of a really, really high-end elite-level player who can not only play into the future on my organization, but also could potentially help me beat a Golden State this year, even just as a role player who grows into being an exceedingly high-level player. So Yeah, I'm not necessarily sure Sacramento is the best fit for what that Nets pick is, but I understand the idea of it. I understand why someone would have the idea that is something they should consider. I think that Jared Mueller asked as well, should the Cavs consider moving that pick for a DeMarcus Cousins? I personally wouldn't. I would want to be able to fast track my rebuild in case LeBron leaves with a high end pick that makes a lot of sense. That Nets pick, like I said, is going to be like a top 5 pick. If LeBron leaves, I would imagine they also try and offload Kevin Love, maybe some of their other high priced items here. And they would probably take a significant step back in the Eastern Conference. So I would probably be trying to rebuild at that stage, but that's just kind of the way that I think of the rebuild process, I guess. I would rather bottom all the way out rather than if I'm Cleveland and not in a super duper high market like Houston, who I think is much more capable of doing something like this. I think that I would rather just kind of bottom out and try and go from there. Matt Gillespie asks, can you name 2 to 3 college seniors who have first-round NBA draft potential? I think Grayson Allen still has that ceiling. I know that that's probably not super popular, but I do believe that he has that ceiling. He has that kind of offensive game. As long as the jump shot rebounds to where it was as a sophomore, he has a lot of kind of NBA moves where he can create space with his really broad shoulders. The defense is never going to be great, but he can be an energy player off the bench, and it wouldn't surprise me if Duke had a big year on his back if he got there. Devontae Graham is a really, really solid guard out of Kansas. Can kind of play both guard positions because he can shoot the ball a little bit. Tough defensively at the point of attack, not necessarily an elite level defender, but wouldn't be crazy to me if he got there. Deontay Mayton is a guy at 6'9" who, if he could stretch it back and shoot threes and become a true stretch instead of just being like more of a mid-range guy, I don't think it would be out of the question for him to get there. The last guy I'm going to mention is kind of a sneaky guy that I've liked for a long time. Chandler Hutchison at Boise State had a breakout year last year finally, averaged something like 16 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists a game. 6'7" wing with a 7-foot wingspan, athletic, can get out in transition. He looks like an NBA player as well, just in terms of frame. He fits the way the league is going as well. He'll be a senior this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he could kind of break out, average 20 points a game, average 8 rebounds and 4 assists a game, and started to hear his name in that discussion a little bit more maybe. Charlie Cravero asks, thoughts on Cam Reddish's commitment and what a core of him, Trey Jones, and RJ, I'm assuming that's Barrett, coexisting would look like. I think that, let's start with the bottom half of that first. They're all very complimentary of each other, I think. That would be fine. I think Coach K would get the best out of them. In terms of Cam Reddish's commitment to Duke, that's been, something that people have thought have been in the works for a while now. Perfect stretch for what Coach K wants to do. He's really, 6'7", 6'8", with a 7'1" wingspan. Really, really capable of not only handling the ball on the outside, and he can create plays in transition with his passing. Is athletic and can take over when he wants. Like I said, perfect frame, perfect athleticism for that stretch 4 position. The thing with Reddish has always been, what Cam Reddish do you get whenever he steps onto the floor? Sometimes he's very high energy. Sometimes he's very low energy and, won't get back on transition defense and just isn't as effective and doesn't utilize his tools in the way that you would hope for on both ends. He can float occasionally. So Cam Reddish, for me, given that Marvin Bagley has reclassified to 2017, Reddish, to me, is the highest upside player in the 2018 NBA, or I guess the 2019 NBA draft class, 2018 recruiting class. You just kind of can't teach the tools that he has. He just really has to utilize them a lot better. He's going to the perfect place to do that, though. They have experience with his player type, and they have quite a bit of coaching experience with a guy like Coach K that has long gotten the best out of a lot of guys. So it's a good spot to be in for Cam Reddish, and I really hope that he reaches the ceiling that I think everyone in the basketball world believes him capable of, just hasn't shown it consistently quite enough yet. King Kayshawn asks, can St. John's finish top 3 in the Big East and make a run toward the NCAA tournament? I am less high on the first part of that. I don't think they will be a top 3 team in the Big East. Just kind of looking at what the Big East is right now, I would certainly have Villanova number 1. I would have Seton Hall number 2. I would probably still have Xavier in my top 25 as well. So there's 3 teams right there. I don't think Creighton's going to take maybe they'll take a step back from where they were at the start of the 2016-17 season. But, I think they're still going to be right in that tournament kind of wheelhouse potential. Marquette, I think, could certainly become an NCAA tournament team as well. Providence doesn't really lose anybody off of an NCAA tournament team last year. I would probably put all of those teams, and Butler, of course. Butler, returns Keelan Martin. Kamar Baldwin is back. Guys like Tyler Wideman are there, and they got the Aaron Thompson, the point guard, 4-star kid to come in. So I think that they're going to be really good as well. LaVal Jordan's a really good coach. I would put St. John's, more in that I guess 6 to 8 range than top 3 range. I understand the excitement right now because Marcus Lovett is really, really good, and Bashir Ahmed had a great year last year, and Shamori Pons is, really, really useful. They get Justin Simon, the kid from Arizona, in. He's a terror defensively. He's really athletic. At the end of the day, I just think they're just a small step below those teams still. Having said that, a lot of these guys are all really young. Lovett and Pons were both freshmen last year, and Justin Simon's going to be a sophomore this year after redshirting. So probably not there yet. Maybe if things go right, they can make the NCAA tournament. I wouldn't rule that out, but I'm still not quite there yet on St. John's. I do think that they will take another step forward, though. Luca at Luca011 asks, if you are watching Finland at Eurobasket, how much are you surprised by Markkanen's games? He's averaging 25 points a game at Eurobasket. And he's doing it pretty efficiently. He's been awesome in clutch time so far. I'm not super duper shocked by that, to be honest. He's always been great in European competition and FIBA-sponsored events. Maybe I am a little bit surprised that he's doing it against, adults and, been one of the best players there already. But this kid is one of the best offensive players in this NBA draft class that we just talked about for a year as being hyper elite. A lot of the concerns that I have about Markkanen's games aren't necessarily scoring the basketball. They don't necessarily have anything to do with what he can do as an offensive weapon. He is a complete offensive player, in my opinion. He really is just kind of capable of taking over games with his jump shooting ability. I think that, if he averaged 12 points a game as a rookie this year in the NBA, I wouldn't be surprised. If he averaged a little bit more than that, I wouldn't even be surprised, just given where Chicago is and how much opportunity he should get. The key is going to be rounding out the rest of his game. He needs to become a better passer. He needs to find a way to defend inside. Another thing that I've seen some people be a little bit surprised about online is that, he moves his feet as well as he has. That's been something he's done basically his entire career to this stage. At Arizona, he was fine moving his feet and playing out on the perimeter. That wasn't a thing. It was always more, is he going to be an effective rebounder? Is he going to be an effective rim protector? And can he kind of, do enough to play center in the NBA? Because that's ultimately where I think he's probably going to have to play a little bit more often than playing the 4. So, no, I'm not super surprised by Lauri Markkanen. He's really, really good. I think he kind of got forgotten due to the Chicago Bulls disaster. Everyone kind of lumped him in with the bad decision made by them to trade Jimmy Butler for what was ultimately a bad package. But just because they traded Jimmy Butler for that package doesn't necessarily mean that he is not a super high level player. Courtney Kennedy asks, who is the most overrated / underrated player in college basketball this season? I will start with underrated because I tend to like to start positively with these things. Reed Travis at Stanford, I think, is probably the most underrated player. I think he's a top 25 player in college basketball. He suffered injuries early in his career, and I think that's why people forgot that he was a McDonald's All-American. But he put up like 17 points and 9 rebounds last year. Every coach that you talk to in the Pac-12 says that this guy is absolutely one of the 5 best players in our league. He was something similar to that last year. He is just an absolute monster. Nobody can move him off the glass. I would say he's probably the most underrated player in the country. In terms of overrated, I would say, man, that's a really tough one because I really think it's hard to be overrated in college basketball because a lot of the guys that do get a lot of recognition are producing. And maybe a guy like I think that a lot of people are assuming that Theo Pinson is going to be able to come in and just kind of step up and be an awesome offensive player. It's hard to call him overrated, though, I think, because he was just a starter on an NCAA champion, too. Like, he was one of the 5 best players on an NCAA champion. I am skeptical on him stepping in and becoming, like, a huge offensive secondary weapon to Joel Berry in that, on the wing next to Joel Berry. So maybe that would be the answer, but I don't really like calling these kids like overrated, underrated. I would say like I just have a little bit of healthy skepticism on what he can do offensively at this stage just because he doesn't have a lot of variation in his dribble, hasn't really become a good shooter yet. I think he really does need to kind of keep improving and keep getting better there. William Kenefake, sorry, man. Comps for Zion Williamson. Does he have potential to become a better shooter and continue progression? Yes, he is super young, even for that class. He is very, very young. I would think there's a chance he will become a better shooter. I certainly believe he will continue progression. Currently, right now, though, he's a 6'6", 6'7" center. For me, he can lead the break in transition, but isn't necessarily a great ball handler in the half court yet. He can really finish inside because he's a lot stronger than everyone. As he moves up in levels, he's not necessarily going to be that much stronger than everyone. I'm a little bit more skeptical on him long term than I think many are. I do think he's going to be an awesome college basketball player, and I think he's really fun. But in terms of long-term NBA projection, there are probably 5, 6, 7, 8 guys in that 2018 class I would rather have. Let's keep going here. Let's see what else we've got. Your favorite conference race this year in college basketball. I think the SEC is going to be a little bit more open than what people think. That Kentucky team is really, really young, and they have some kind of overlap questions with their roster and the way that that's all going to fit together. I'm interested in what Florida can be. They return a decent amount. It's going to be a lot dependent on what John Egbunu can bring coming off of the injury. Can Igor Kulichov be a really useful player for them? They're both really, really high-level teams. I really believe in Mike White as a coach. I would also point out that below them, there are quite a few teams. Alabama, I think, could make a push up there. I think Texas A&M could make a push up there if Dwayne Wilson kind of calms the point guard position down a little bit. Yeah, I think that's going to actually be a really, really good conference race this year. I think that could be a fun one to watch. Let's see, what other questions do we got here? What would you do about a possible Joel Embiid extension if you were the Philadelphia 76ers? That comes from Kenny Brophy. Yeah, that's kind of a $100 million question right now. I would probably table it until the summer. And if he does what people think he can do this year, plays 60 games and dominates in the way that he did in 30 games last year, I probably wouldn't have any real doubts about maxing him. I would be okay with that because I believe that he can be the best player in the NBA, to be honest. I still think that's his ceiling. But right now, I would want to see him put it up for 60 games this year. I would not feel super confident based off of a 30-game sample on maxing him right now. Chris Bukowski asks at CB9921, what are your thoughts on Virginia this season? I feel like people are sleeping on them. Love the young backcourt in Jerome and Guy, and they have an elite head coach. I agree with all that. I really do like the backcourt. Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy are both really, really good scorers. I think they're both going to take a pretty big step forward this year. They have two guys in the front court I also really like, and Mamadi Diakite, who I think a lot of people will tell you is a guy that NBA scouts and NBA executives are really excited about if he can kind of take that leap under Tony Bennett. Really athletic, shot blocker, can even step out and shoot a little bit. They also have Isaiah Wilkins, who for me is one of the best role players, one of the best glue guys in all of college basketball. He is one of the best defenders in the entire country. He's tough. He's physical. He gets after it on guys. I'm a big fan of kind of all four of those guys. And whenever you have Tony Bennett, they're going to be fine, I think. I think they're an NCAA tournament team. I had to do a top 25 teams in college basketball this season earlier today for The Athletic to kind of get us set up. And I really strongly considered them in the top 25, which I feel like a lot of people aren't right now. I believe in the talent. I also really believe in a couple of kids that haven't gotten a chance to show out yet from that vaunted 2016 recruiting class. And Jay Huff and specifically DeAndre Hunter, who's a 6'7" kind of playmaker type, who another guy that NBA executives are really interested to see this year play some college basketball. So I agree with Chris. I think they actually are being a little bit underrated right now. I would expect at some point this year they will be ranked in the top 25 just because Virginia at this stage is kind of that program where why would you bet against them? I don't know. Alexander Juno asks, and I think this is going to be the last question. Is it possible to become a blue blood? Can a school like Wisconsin jump from perennially successful to Duke, Kentucky status in the 21st century? Yeah, I think that it is. I think that a team we're seeing that right now with is Villanova. And you might, I guess, argue that, Villanova has always been kind of considered a blue blood of college basketball. I don't know that I'd necessarily agree with that. I do think that a lot of it comes down to coaching, though. A lot of it comes down to stability and, finding the right recruiters and finding the right guys who can run the right scheme and, create a long-term viable product. With Villanova, I think we're in the midst of seeing that occur right now. They're out on the recruiting trail, getting better and better kids every year. Over the last 4 years, they've been no worse than a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, which is crazy because, after, I guess, what would that be, 2013 maybe, you kind of would hear Jay Wright's name percolating a little bit as a guy that, kind of has to watch out and could end up on the hot seat at some point. But maybe the best example of all of this is I consider Gonzaga to be a blue blood of, college basketball. And in this day and age, in the 21st century, as you kind of mentioned, Alex, I think it's pretty hard not to consider Gonzaga a blue blood. They continually get in higher level recruits every year. I know that they still have not won a title yet, but I think if you talk to people around the entirety of college basketball, that a lot of people think that's just a matter of time for Mark Few. And I think that maybe last year was his big shot, but I think that most people believe that as long as he's there, he's going to get back. This team has an absolute capacity to reload every single year, and they haven't missed the NCAA tournament for what feels like 2 decades now. Sometimes they take a small step back, like in 2016, where it just kind of ended up happening that they lost quite a bit. But even then, if I remember correctly, they still went to the Sweet 16, I think. Maybe you'd point to 2014, but they also still went to the round of 32 there. I think that they've been to the round of 32 now like 8 straight years. So it's not even just getting to the NCAA tournament. It's, having a modicum of success in the NCAA tournament, experiencing a win. So I would say it's still possible. I would say Gonzaga is developing into that blue blood. I think Villanova, was probably not on the true like blue blood level, but they're getting there as they continue to experience success. And I have them as my number 4 team entering the college basketball season this year. So I would imagine that's going to continue to happen. But yeah, I do believe it. I think that, as Kentucky and Duke continue to just dominate recruiting in a big way, the floor opens a little bit for elite level coaches who recruit to their system, as well as anyone in the country, and really, have the best scheme fits of anyone in the country, and have the just general best scheme and have the best coaching ability in the country. Because, if the elite players are all going, 2 to 3 places, I would also include Arizona in that, then, I think coaching becomes even more important to program success. And, Michigan State, I think we'd all consider a blue blood at this stage. Tom Izzo is a great example of that. And I think Tom Izzo is a great example of, development and getting kids in and not being afraid of the one and done either, given that, they took in Miles Bridges last year and they took in Gary Harris and, who ended up being there for 2 years, and Jaren Jackson this year's potential one and done. So yeah, no, I think you can do it still. It's just going to take some time. Guys, thank you all for asking questions. Thank you all for, tweeting at me and interacting with the show. I really appreciate it. On Friday, we're going to start with some conference previews. We're going to get back into the swing of things here. I just wanted to, kind of interact with you guys a little bit more during this episode because that's something that I've been asked to do, and it's, I think, a really interesting concept as well. So thank you all for calling in. Maybe I'll do a few more mailbag type questions at the end of some shows going forward. But yeah, thank you all for what's been, for the show, an incredibly successful summer in terms of growth and in terms of more people listening to it. And, until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.